This video was brought to you in part by SD Bullion.
Start investing in gold and silver today at sdbullion.com and join the over 35,000 precious metal investors who have made the switch to the lowest gold and silver prices in the industry. SD Bullion recently claimed a spot on the prestigious Inc. 500, making them one of the fastest-growing bullion companies in the United States. With low bullion prices and over-the-top customer service, SD Bullion is setting the standard for precious metals transactions. Visit www.sdbullion.com today and start saving on every precious metals purchase you make.
Hey everyone, I just launched a new website, financeandliberty.com. Please follow the link in the description of this video and subscribe to our free newsletter, where you can keep up to date with all our original interviews, along with some of the best financial videos and articles from the web. Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with financeandliberty.com, and back with us today is Jim Willie, editor of the Hat-Trick Letter found on goldenjackass.com. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure being on, and here we are approaching the Christmas holidays and post-election, and a lot of weird events going on, and a couple of rather severe shockwave type events are in progress. So, wow, exciting times, Elijah, really, truly. I mean, imagine where we were 30 years, well, you can't, I can. I've been out of graduate school for 35 years, and I've seen a lot. It doesn't seem like a lot of years, but I try to take a look. Where was I 10 years later? Where was I 10 years later? Where was I 10 years later? And yeah, it's a progression, but I've never seen anything remotely like what we're enduring now. Nothing even close to what we're enduring now. We're making history. This is really ultra strange, bizarre land that we're in. We're seeing, almost the death of capitalism in the West. We're seeing the rise of fascism and the complete perversion of democracy in the West. We're seeing endless war that might be interrupted soon in the West. And I like to remind people that back in 2005, 4, 5, and 6, I stated my expectation that in the end game we would have the dollar defended by profound war. And a lot of people called me stupid. I kind of enjoy being called stupid because it's considered intelligent to be wrong in our upside-down society. But here we are. The big events right now, I think, relate to the U.S. Treasury bond market and to Italy. As Deutsche Bank has moved into the background, I think Italy is going to take over in that bank threat position, if you know what I mean.
Definitely, and speaking of Italy, we were going to talk about the Italian referendum that failed to pass recently. The prime minister then resigned. The people basically voted on it, and it lost by nearly a 20-point margin. So can you explain the significance of this and what the consequences will be?
Oh, what an enormous topic, but I gathered some notes, Elijah, so that I could be a little bit orderly, and I might appear to be reading things, but I've got like 18 points on Italy. The Renzi regime is going to be dissolved. He lost. His mandate is gone. All three of his main opponents, stated their open wish to abandon the common euro currency. Now, when I say exit the euro, people must hear me correctly. I'm referring to the common euro currency. I'm not referring to the European Union. Okay, that's another way of exiting the euro. That's more like exiting the Union, exiting the EU, exiting the European Union. I'm talking about the common euro currency that has acted like a straitjacket and noose around the neck for countries like Italy and Greece, and even Spain and Portugal, the pigs, P-I-G-S. Italy has observed just across the Adriatic Sea the rape and strangulation of Greece. I mean by means of asset seizures, budget austerity, cutting back on the big bloated Greek government budget. And the people didn't like it because they were thrown out of jobs. The asset seizures from the German banks, all the chicanery with the IMF loans and bailouts that were tied to the German promises of collateral seizures. And then there were, significant seizures. The Italian banks are at a late stage of collapse, very late, and this is final. I just got a message from he's one of my partners for news gathering. It's Don from Florida, and he said, Jim, we have a friend over from Italy, and the friend is well connected, and we're being told that everybody knows the Italian banking system is on its last legs. This is it. They all know it, and they're all angry because many of the people in Italy are facing losses from their bank accounts, from their savings account, from their bonds for the banks. Okay, there have been some confiscations. I mean, like 100% confiscations. I have a client who says I have a best friend in Italy, had a $20,000 bank account at Monte dei Paschi, and the person went in and was told, you have nothing there. There's nothing in your account. And they explained it was bailed in. They took it. Several bond conversions have taken place in the last couple months, but in the last year, there have been lots of kind of half-assed measures. And then finally they went in and just converted these bank bonds and made them equity to satisfy certain banking reserve requirements. And oh my gosh, what it meant was that the last in line bondholders for getting a haircut suddenly became first in line for getting a haircut. Not what they wanted to see. So we have a collapse of the Italian banking system that's imminent. These conversions from bond to equity, they're engineering steep losses. I mean, like 30, 50, 80% losses. Here's the important part. Let's get to reaction. The Euro Central Bank cannot halt this process. The Euro Central Bank, that's Prince Draghi, Mario Draghi. I call him Prince Draghi to make him sound like a royal piece of garbage. But the Euro Central Bank, they can cover floated Italian government bonds, the sovereign bonds out there. But they're too many. They're too many, and they've got the banking system that's a wreck. Okay, apart from the Italian government bonds, the Italian banking system has 380 billion euros of debt. So you've got the 1 trillion euros of Italian government debt plus 380 billion euros of Italian banking system debt, and it's going bad. It's just cratering. And I asked the question a few months ago and got it answered. What neighboring country is at the biggest risk? And the answer is not Germany, it's France. France is on the hook. This was as of, I believe, best estimate, I believe it was sometime around July. The estimated French exposure to the Italian systemic debt, the whole collage of debt, was the French exposure was 230 billion spread over several banks. Okay, it's going to go bad. The big question is how much will the write-off be, not whether there'll be any write-off. Italy, as the voice said 3 years ago to me, Italy is Greece times 10. They saw what happened to Greece. Nothing got fixed. Assets got taken. Budgets went down. People lost jobs. Riot in the streets. Italy doesn't want that. And it's going to be 10 times larger. Okay, I believe the consequence of this referendum vote will be to follow through on the promises made by the major opponents who are going to form this next coalition. And that will be for them in Italy to abandon the euro currency. I call that leaving the euro, not the union, the euro currency. When they abandon the euro currency, they're going to adopt the lira and instantly devalue it by 30% at least. Now that will stimulate their economy. Imagine you've got Italian clothing, shoes, wine, cheese, cars, perfumes. You've got a lot of diverse products made in Italy. Imagine them being 30% cheaper to the rest of Europe and the United States and North America, and Japan for that matter, Korea too, China. 30% discount on Italian-made goods. That's going to be significant for stimulating the economy in a way they could not stimulate before, Elijah, because they were caught in the euro currency straitjacket and noose around the neck. Once you see the effect, the positive stimulus, of course there's going to be devastation. Of course there's going to be a lot of bank collapses, but you're going to see an economic revival from this lira devaluation, which brings about stimulus. When other neighboring countries like France is the other nation mentioned from other poles across the continent, which countries have the biggest desire to leave the euro, and it's France and Italy. They're neck and neck. It's like 40% of the population want out. And Spain, it's much less than that. Portugal, less than that. I don't know why it's less than that. Maybe the Italians are the only smart ones out there, along with the French. Okay, so let's look at this from a different angle. I was thinking a couple months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, that Deutsche Bank would deliver the death blow to the banking system in Western Europe, and it would spread a contagion to the British and the U.S. and Canadian banks. It didn't happen. Well, why not? Because the Fed and Draghi were printing tremendous amounts of money and covering all kinds of sovereign bonds, and then Draghi made the revolutionary, I don't want to call it revolution, I don't like that word, made the extreme innovative move of announcing coverage of corporate bonds in Europe. Okay, so that enabled them to cover the Deutsche Bank bonds and more. And they patched it up and prevented the Deutsche Bank failure, which I think was really a failure and still is a failure, but they're managing the liquidation very effectively. All right, so what Deutsche Bank could not do in fracturing the European banking system, Italy will. Imagine a 30% devaluation on, say, 3 big French banks holding Italian government debt. That's a 30% write-down immediately to their balance sheet. If they're holding 230 billion euros of Italian debt in the French banks, a 30% is 70 billion euro loss. If it's concentrated in 2 big banks, it's a deal wrecker. It's a bank killer. Okay, that's what's coming. The fallout after they announce they're converting their debt to the lira, after they announce the devaluation of the lira. They're not going to do a conversion to lira without doing a devaluation. Makes no sense. Now, on a bigger picture, they've got 300 billion in losses coming. 300 billion euros in losses coming. That's from a 30% write-down on the 1 trillion euros of Italian debt. They've got 23 billion in losses coming to the French bank. I think I messed up there. 70 billion. The Italian population, just a final footnote item. They don't mess around. Okay, we saw the Greeks take to the street. They did so with a certain degree of violence, to be sure. But that's not what the Italians do. The Italians take it one level greater. Elijah, the Italians have a long history of pretty nasty violence in the streets, much worse than Greece. You always hear about the stories of the French farmers dumping manure on a bureaucrat's office steps or dumping truckloads of potatoes on the boulevards. That's nothing compared to what the Italians do. They do firebombs. They do not tolerate this stuff. And the Germans are scared witless of what the Italians are going to do regarding default of German debt, of Italian debt held by German banks. So the Italian referendum, in my opinion, starts the process here for exiting the common euro currency, moving toward the lira, devaluing it, having some bank calamities, having some contagion in France, and I just don't see how it's going to be well contained. I think it's going to be maybe the story of 2017, along with the Trump plans, the Trump initiatives, and the sabotage of Trump that might come. Italy is going to be the biggest story of 2017. Italy will do what Greece could not. What happens in Italy will be repeated in France, Spain, and Portugal. And isn't it interesting that we hear a lot about France in the same vein as we do in Italy, but France is not included as a pigs nation? I think it should be a PFIGS group that includes France, because France fundamentals are horrible, almost as bad as Italy, and I think equally bad as Spain's. So I hope that answers the question on what the consequences are. And, we really don't know some things. We're going to get into some uncharted territory because we never had a union in Europe before that had a severe, important, critical splinter. Greece is not a big splinter. Italy is more than a splinter. Italy is like a plank, and it's going to cause very severe fallout, Elijah.
Now, I wanted to move to what you're just talking about, the Trump administration. Now, if we kind of look back on the last year and a half, it was basically the media and, all the experts being wrong and Trump just winning over and over. And then finally, again, contrary to what the experts were saying, Trump actually did, end up victorious over Hillary Clinton. So can you, I guess, discuss a little bit about this? Because, Trump was, in 2016, he dominated the media. He's now the man of the year, according to Time magazine. What do you think, now looking forward to 2017, what do you think a Trump administration, what do you think his agenda items will be?
Well, before I get into that main question, I have to address the press. The press in the United States demonstrated that they're really not press. We have a lot of WikiLeaks information and other information that the press, and the worst offender was CNN, were directly involved with the Hillary Clinton campaign. That many people, up to something like 15 different Clinton Foundation workers, were given press credentials to pose as press reporters. They just lied. They used false polls. They did like 50% extra polling of Democrats, underpolled the Republicans, claimed that Hillary had leads when every other more rational and honest and fair poll that I saw consistently had Trump between 15 and 40 points ahead. They didn't get it wrong. They were corrupted beyond description. And now they're going to have to pay the consequence because Trump just announced that he's beginning Trump TV. He's making good on a threat, and you watch him cut out CNN and other press networks from the news channels. From the channel of information flow. Okay. They didn't get it wrong. I don't like saying that. It's kind of like, back in 2008 and 9, the press was saying no one got it right regarding the mortgage explosion. Yeah, I got it right. A lot of people got it right because we weren't corrupted. We weren't paid to say the wrong thing. And I don't call that being wrong. I call that corrupt, to be intentionally falsified.
Just one interjection here. So that's really interesting how you were saying, sorry to maybe get us off a topic a little bit, but just you were saying about how the media got it wrong, and that because if you were looking at the accurate polls, like you were saying, they were 15 to 40 points ahead. Which polls were those?
Which polls were they not? I put the burden on you. There are all kinds of smartphone polls, internet polls, stratified random sample polls across 10 demographic groups. There are lots and lots of independent polls that were done with like 1,000 to 5,000 people polled. And I don't have the names in front of me, Elijah, because they were too numerous. There were all kinds of polls. It seemed like every week there was a different poll that came out and said Trump's got a 24-point lead. What's all this stuff regarding Gallup and CNN poll and ABC, New York Times polls? They're all ridiculously corrupted. And when they got dissected, a lot of things came out. There was a group called, I like to focus on the corrupt side rather than the correct side, because the corrupt side needs to be exposed. There was a group that came out following the second Hillary versus Trump debate. And the group was called Hart Information Service, H-A-R-T. And they came out and said that following the debate, Hillary had an 11-point lead, the second debate. So Zero Hedge did some research, or they were handed some research, and they noticed that the Hart Information Service was given $180,000 from the Clinton Foundation, to which I say, what for? Or is that a question that a conspiracy theorist would come up with? The Hillary Foundation not only planted news reporters, not only got collusion from Wolf Blitzer on the third debate, complete list of questions that the Hillary team came up with in order to confront and try to knock off balance Trump. Not only did they do that, but they bought a poll result. This is pathetic for a supposed democratic nation. The U.S. isn't even remotely a democratic nation. I remember when I was a little boy, John Kennedy won because there were rumored to be several thousand dead people in Chicago that Mayor Daley got to vote for Kennedy. Hillary just had in one state 3 million dead people revealed as voting for her. One state, I think it was Michigan, not sure. Michigan or Wisconsin. All the recounts that we're starting to see now in the upper Midwest are resulting in more votes for Trump and negated votes for Hillary and a wider margin of victory for Trump. And idiots out there are saying, gosh, the recount's going to show Hillary going to win. What idiots? I'm tired of stupidity being splashed in my face. The recounts will reveal the corruption to a greater extent, will not open the door for more dead people and multiple absentee ballots showing up for Hillary. I looked, early in this polling process, like back in May and June and, the Super Tuesdays, things like that. I looked at how two different supposed random sample polls had big differences, like 16% difference on, say, the Trump percentage. Why would the Trump percentage in one be 16% higher than the Trump percentage for another when they're both supposedly random samples? I'm a statistician. This is like second level course, simple stuff for random sampling, confidence intervals. I mean, this is very basic, like junior level college material. And if you took a couple of courses in mathematical statistics and probability, Elijah, you would encounter this. So they were saying that the margin of error Margin of error was 3% with a 95% confidence. Okay, if you take the difference between two such things like that, you multiply that 3% by the square root of 2. That's how it works. I don't want to get into all the detail. It's very basic stuff. Okay, so square root of 2 times 3%, you're around 4%. Then why was the difference between two supposedly valid samples 16%? That's 4 times the confidence interval. Okay, what it says is you've got several billion to 1 odds that the two samples are valid. That's what I concluded. They're not valid. They weren't valid. So I started looking at the bias, and then I started reading more to see that the Democrats were getting oversampled. New York Times oversampled the Democrats. What's new about that? Gosh, there's something wrong with New York City. I'm sorry. They've got a disease. I don't know what the hell it is, and I don't care. But they don't think straight. They don't report news, and they love to cover the crimes of their Wall Street boys. Okay, I could go on and you know, very emotional about this because I'm disgusted at how the U.S. has turned into a direct third world candidate with confirmation of vote fraud. This is what you see in Venezuela. It's what you see in little Mickey Mouse countries, banana republics. And it's all covered by the Patriot Act and other laws where you cannot challenge the voting machines. Some woman in Broward County near Miami got exposed for enormous amounts of falsified absentee ballots for Hillary. There were warehouses, small warehouses, with millions of absentee ballots already made out for Hillary, all falsified in the upper Midwest. Are they in jail? No, they're not doing anything because they're Democrats. I equate Democrat now with fascist. Fascist, Marxist, ugly, vicious, corrupt, murderous. That's what I equate them to. And the Republicans, I used to think, the Republicans are just clowns. They want their privilege. They want their second vote. They want the tax breaks. I don't look at them that way anymore. I look at them as wanting to restore the republic. And Trump has got an interesting task here, Elijah. He has to restore the republic and re-energize the economy and re-industrialize the economy and repair the infrastructure and do it without sabotage. Sabotage by whom? The Democrats, the fascists, the Marxists, the ugly, corrupt, murdering fraud kings. And I don't know that he's going to get a lot of support from the Republicans because many of them are exposed in similar crimes. So how did he shape, or is he shaping, his cabinet? I'm going to speak in broad brush tones here, but it looks like the Pentagon generals are going to be occupying significant posts in the Trump cabinet. This, in my opinion, is indicative of two things. A silent coup. I mean, I have people tell me, oh, Jim, the U.S. will never be taken over by the Pentagon in a military coup. Oh, really? How about if the majority or even a significant number, a critical mass, of the cabinet members are generals? Oh, I don't know. That'll never happen. It's happening now. A lot of things that these idiots out there tell me will never happen. It's happening now. And other things that they don't think will happen, they don't even know how to recognize that it's happening now. The second significant part about this is the Pentagon generals might have told Trump, go ahead, do your thing during the campaign trail. Go ahead. We'll make sure that nothing happens to you, like getting shot by the murderers, the hired killers who work for the Clinton Foundation. Anyway, let's get back to Trump. What does Trump want to do? I've been monitoring, and I kind of write on the wall. What's he trying to do? He wants to reduce corporate and individual taxes. He wants to end the wars. He wants to expose the ISIS extremists, terrorists. He wants to rebuild the infrastructure. He hasn't talked about something that I'd like to hear him give a lot more emphasis to, and that's reindustrialize the United States after 40 years of outsourced industry. I'd like to see 10,000 new companies built, created in the free trade zones. We have free trade zones in every state almost. They're given corporate tax breaks, they're given property tax breaks, they're given all kinds of, import allowances, all kinds of breaks. We need to reindustrialize. We need to export. We need to stop this import death process. Okay, Trump has some good objectives. He wants to end the headquarters tax break given to U.S. corporations when they move out of the country. Why on earth would we give them a tax break? This is sabotage. Okay, I'd like to be kind of clear about something. I do not expect much direct swamp cleanup. He had to win the office. In order to win the White House office, he had to make compromises. Some of the compromises involve some pretty dirty people. They involve deals not to be killed. And I think the main deals made were with Langley, our security agency, and with Wall Street, our bankers. So I expect that they're probably going to be well represented, the bad guys in the cabinet. And it's going to be interesting to see how they try to clean up their own backyard. I don't have a lot of confidence about that. I have a feeling that he's going to give emphasis to reindustrialization, to economic development, to immigration issues, and then say the second term is going to be devoted primarily to the fraud cleanup. I mean, gosh, we got military contract fraud. It's in the trillions. Same motive as 9/11 for hitting the Pentagon with that missile. It wasn't an aircraft, commercial aircraft. Gosh, I still encounter dumbass people who think that was an aircraft. Well, really? That was the first aircraft, commercial aircraft that crashed in our entire human history that didn't have any debris. I just saw a picture of the debris from that Brazilian soccer team. It's a horrendous tragedy that happened. Something like 70 out of 85 people on board were killed. Look at the debris. It's scattered over 2 square miles. Where's the debris on the Pentagon lawn? There is none. It was a missile. Wake the hell up. Okay, the financial fraud must be reduced, and the press propaganda must be outlined. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Trump TV is given the upper leg on news, and they call them scoops. Okay, we're going to see Trump TV has a scoop on the latest development with the Trump administration on some policy with Japan or Korea. And CNN's not going to get the news. I'd really like to see the FCC license for CNN suspended for 30 days. Just have them off the air for 30 days and see how they change. That would be interesting. Trump has claimed that he's going to end these wars. I'm very curious about the secession to the wars. I'm very curious about the secession to the bond monetization, okay, the QE. Trump has an ambitious $1 trillion infrastructure project plan for the country, but it's going to require financing. This is not going to be easy. He needs the look at the angle here. He's going to need the cooperation of the Fed, whose soldiers are the Wall Street banks. Going to need their cooperation to get financing for his $1 trillion infrastructure projects. If he makes enemies of them, he won't get his infrastructure. So it's all tied together. The U.S. economy urgently needs to increase on a massive level their exports and severely curtail their imports. This is going to be, I think, the major core of his reindustrialization theme. And I think he needs to use the free trade zones in order to bring this implementation about. We need 10,000 new companies quickly in the free trade zones that make copper tubing, that export agricultural products, that make, just basic lumber products, that produce cement with limestone and ship it. We need a priority of 1/3 of all output is exported. Unfortunately, and this is unavoidable, Elijah, you can't do this increased export without realizing some shortages to your own supply chain within the U.S. economy. I expect we're going to get some sabotage. I believe the Trump administration is going to maybe see the bond monetization by the Fed, the QE, quantitative easing, this hyper-monetary inflation. And it's not just, I got corrected a couple times, kind of interesting how it happened, but I've been calling it Zimbabwe, African type hyper-monetary inflation. But we've seen a couple examples in South America. And it's not unique just to the other parts of the world, in particular Africa. If the Wall Street boys feel like they're under attack, like their fraud is going to be brought to the open, or maybe even their pedophilia and murder of children is brought into the open, if they see that certain things that Elliot Spitzer started to prosecute them for before he got stung by the honeypot, if Wall Street feels at risk, they're going to pull the plug on QE. You're going to see the stock market dive, the bond market dive, and all kinds of hell hit the U.S. economy. And that'll be because Trump went after the bad guys in Wall Street. So watch for how he deals with them to avoid the sabotage, what compromise he makes, and how that all turns out. The other sabotage that could come, I think, is going to be a little bit more unique, a little bit more clever, a little bit more subtle. There might be an effort by the Western banker elite to bring about an international boycott of the Treasury bill as trade payment vehicle. And they might, it could be like the Rothschilds and a couple of other very evil groups working with China and Russia and say, look, we're going to try to further your agenda, but can you help us out by wrecking Trump? We want you to stop accepting the Treasury bill for trade payment at the ports. And by doing that, it would force Trump to launch a domestic-only currency, devalue it, and realize currency crisis, price inflation, product supply shortage, and more riots and chaos in the streets. Okay, that is a macro sabotage risk. I think it's inevitable that the new Scheist dollar is coming, Elijah. There's just no way to get around it. It's a domestic-only, U.S.-only dollar. We cannot print money over $1 trillion a year to cover the U.S. government federal debt. We cannot do that when it's used as the global currency reserve, holding the foundation together for banks across the world. I don't encounter 1 in 100 Americans who understands this concept. I was with a conversation of a pretty smart guy from New York City yesterday. The second time he came around, he said, hey, Jim, here, I'm back. I'm doing this or that. And I thought I saw you in the crowd. I'm checking out. What are you doing? Can I buy you a drink? And I said, well, no, that's okay. We can just talk. And he said, Jim, I don't understand what you mean when you say the global currency reserve. Doesn't that just mean the whole world loves our dollar? I said, no, it's not that simple. See, they don't understand what the global currency reserve means. It's the foundation element for the Korean banking system, the foundation element for the German banking system, for the Italian banking system, for the Nigerian banking system, for the Canadian banking system. And we're printing them $1 trillion a year to cover our debt. You can't do that. Okay. The other important point is that any newly launched U.S. dollar, I call it the Scheist dollar because that's German for shit, flotsam, refuse, jetsam. The new dollar, if it's U.S. only, will endure the effects of the U.S. fundamentals. And the fundamentals include a $550 billion annual trade deficit. It's a prescription for annual 30% devaluations. I think by the time we get the U.S. trade deficit down by 100 billion or 150 billion, I think we're going to be looking at a couple of 30%, maybe 3 different 30% devaluation. You get 2, and that's 70% times 70% preserved is 49. Call it 50. Do a third, and you've got 35% preserved, so you lose 65%. 3 different 30% devaluations, and you lose almost 2/3 of your currency's value. That means all the Toyotas, all the Mercedes jump by double in price. Okay. The U.S. government federal deficit, the government federal deficit is $1.4 trillion, $1,400 billion last fiscal year. And incredibly, the indications are that it'll be closer to $2 trillion this fiscal year. And Obama claims that he did a great job. He did, of wrecking the U.S. economy. I believe the new Scheist dollar will be subject to devaluations as a result of the trade deficits. I believe the U.S. government federal deficit, not trade, but the government deficit, will be covered by forced investments within the pension system, the 401ks, the IRAs, the KIOs, and then they're going to go after the big element, the corporate managed pensions, which includes mine from my old days in the 80s. It's not a huge amount, but I do wonder if it's going to evaporate or just be converted into third world government debt. Okay, well, that pretty much answers the question on what do we expect, what should we expect from the Trump administration. I think a lot of efforts, a lot of initiatives to reindustrialize, to get our export trade going, to get people back at work, to reduce, that cannot happen without corporate taxes being reduced. We have the highest corporate taxes in the world. And I make the point that that's bad policy, but I have a couple of smart colleagues who said, Jim, it might have been part of the plan to export our debt, to export much of everything about the United States, to make sure that there are more dollars outside the country, to keep the demand for the dollar outside the country. And that makes a lot of sense. Reversing that is going to be catastrophic. Well, we're in for a very interesting time for the Trump administration, and I'll go on record. I think he's going to have one term. One term, and then he realizes there's just too much devastation. I can't engineer fixes without losing my popular support. I can't go ahead and reform the corruption without making enormous enemies who will make sure I don't win a second term, so I'm not going to do a second term. That's what I think is going to happen. But this is very complicated, and we're not done yet with the cabinet selection. This is very interesting. There's a 5th general being cited today for another cabinet post. I'm most interested in Finance, Secretary of State, and Secretary of Defense. The other positions they're kind of minor. I mean, they're not unimportant, but they're kind of minor.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. That's it for part 1. Please follow the link in the description of this video and subscribe to our free newsletter so you'll be notified when part 2 is released.